In the AHIS 2500 course at the University of Newcastle in Semester 2 2021, our teaching team strive to relate mythological content from the antiquities to modern material in order to establish familiarity and relatability to the concepts we were introducing. In relying on reception in this manner, a plethora of digital material was incorporated into the content, ranging from film and television to video games. The latter makes for an interesting perspective on teaching content, such as history, with research focusing on the association between content and student investment through the act of playing. According to James Paul Gee, video games should be considered as educational tools, given that they employ good learning principles. Gee tells us that when students play a game, especially a role-playing game, they inhabit the identity presented by the narrative, and as such have a greater stake in the game's content, which encourages deep learning. Most games that have been used to explore this concept in a historical context rely on period games such as Civilization or the Assassin's Creed series. However, games such as Horizon Zero Dawn employ mythological content in futuristic settings, in this case, post-apocalyptic Earth, which work to heighten students' awareness of their present, how it connects to the past, and how such connections will continue into the future. While the influence of classical mythology from Greece and Rome is the most prominent, Horizon Zero Dawn also borrows themes from Egyptian and Viking mythology, as well as Native American culture, in order to express the variance in developing or redeveloping cultures. Players inhabit the identity of Aloy, raised as an outcast to a tribe centred around an all-mother figure. Later, we learn that this is the AI Gaia. By positioning players as an outsider, they are encouraged to think critically of the religious structures with which they interact, and are more easily adapted to Aloy's perspective as it functionally mirrors their own. Though the game plot requires players to think critically of religion, the way its world functions relies heavily on Greek mythology. For example, Gaia, who the Nora tribe worship as the All-Mother, is an artificial intelligence tasked with restoring life-sustaining capabilities to the world after all life on Earth is exterminated. Her sub-functions, which develop their own consciousness before the events of the game, are named after gods from classical mythology and responsible for much the same domains as those gods. Demeter reintroduces the flora of the Earth from preserved genetic stock. Artemis is responsible for the Earth's fauna in much the same way. Hephaestus constructs terraforming machines in manufacturing plants called cauldrons, and Apollo, though sabotaged pre-game, was responsible for archiving human history and culture. The way these AI interact with the world is the same for how they would in ancient narratives, for the most part invisible, but interacting with a hero when the need arises. The technology used by Aloy within the game, called a focus device, bridges the gap between past and present in order to make up for the loss of Apollo and inform on how the world as Aloy knows it came to be. This also provides embedded narratives with which the player can interact, giving them the agency to learn as much or as little about the game's lore as they would like, outside of the emergent narrative that is necessary to advance the plot of the game. Within these embedded narratives is a wealth of knowledge about how the previous age of humanity operated, and these also show an in-game reception of mythology and antiquity with which we are familiar, such as an abandoned Odyssey project aimed at launching a colony ship into space as a response to the climate crisis, and the offer for a virtual tour of a restored ancient Greece, including the Acropolis, Mount Lycabettus, and the Temple of Zeus. Such emphasis on classical material asserts a belief in the perseverance of antiquity and projects a fictional trajectory for its continuance. What we're shown is the inevitability of adaptation coupled with a reliance on the past as a foundation to adapt from. The treatment of technology in place of divinity is an imagining of how such post-apocalyptic primitive cultures might interpret science with which they have no understanding or no context. And this in turn comments on the development of religious structures in antiquity also. Aloy's own narrative, in which she tries to understand her origins, is what really ties the game's plot to the various historical influences purposely presented within the game. Her quest is a reflection for the need for humanity to feel a sense of belonging, which we achieve by looking at and relating to our own history. Horizon Zero Dawn presents an amalgamation of human origins, from the more subtle influence of antiquity in character and lore to the more obvious inclusion of dinosaur-like machines. Aloy and the players' reliance on the focus device to interact with her environment and the past is a reflection on our own reliance on technology and mirrors it, as in computers and gaming platforms, which we use to actively engage with ancient material. Though games like Civilization and Assassin's Creed, with a focus on ancient environments, are more directly linked to ancient material, the use of post-apocalyptic or other science fiction-based narratives allow for critical thought to lend itself to the past, present, and future. The game makes no attempt to preserve classical material in an original or authentic state, and yet it's a brilliant example of how we can receive ancient material in modernity while simultaneously providing an example of how it might continue to be received well into the future. Though in the AHIS 2500 lecture, Horizon Zero Dawn was used as an example of how classical reception works, students were encouraged to play the game for themselves with a full understanding of the social context in which it was developed and with an understanding of the mythology underpinning the game's narrative. By playing the game, students are encouraged to think critically about how religious structures contributed to the development of society and culture in the past. This would then be compared to their own understanding of the present and how it might contribute to discussions of identity in the future. Within the classroom, we use non-traditional platforms such as Horizon Zero Dawn to encourage critical thinking regarding the place of mythology within modern contexts. In this way, we instilled in students the idea that the persistence of mythology is not dependent on direct reference to ancient material, but exists in a variety of receptive formats that do not necessarily fit the traditional structure of classical reception. This in turn facilitates a deeper understanding of the continued relevance of classical reception in the contemporary era.